Okay, after spending way too much time playing this game, I figured it's about time I talk about it as well. To say I'm addicted to this game is an understatement. Little did I know that when I bought this game, it would lead me to playing over 30 hours in just 1 week, and nearly have this game 100% completed. Jesus fucking Christ, I have nothing better to do with my life. But with those 30 hours of me no-lifing this game, I at least get to make a video about it. So sit down, grab a drink and a snack, because I'm going to explain to you why I am so addicted to this game. So, I guess before I talk about why I'm addicted to Halls of Torment, I should probably explain what Halls of Torment is. And obviously, for those of you who've already played this game, you already know what it is. But for those of you who don't know, Halls of Torment gameplay-wise is a wave-based roguelike with the graphic style of something like old school Diablo. But instead of trying to survive indefinitely, you have 30 minutes, then after those 30 minutes are over, you have a boss to kill after each stage. And as of currently, there are only 3 stages to choose from, but trust me when I say this, unlocking the last 2 levels just isn't the main goal of the game, which I will explain here soon. But how I would explain the level progression, the first map is easy difficulty, the second one is medium difficulty, and the last one is hard difficulty. And in order for you to unlock each level, you have to beat the current level you have before to unlock the next one. And each level you play has their own quests in them that add new things for you to use in the main hub area. And each level has its own style to it as well. The first level is this creepy, dark dungeon area filled with bones and corpses strewn about. The second level is literal hell. There's fire, magma, brimstone everywhere you walk. And the enemies look like something that you would see from something biblical. You got these imps that rush you, and these human husks that chase you down. Then you get swarmed by these hellhounds. And the mini-bosses that come after you are these big demons, magma slime, and these super speedy flying imps that rush you. And finally, there's this bridge map that is significantly harder than the last 2. Not only are the enemies tougher, but you can only move laterally to move further around the map. As I said earlier, at the end of each stage, once the timer goes down, you end the map with a boss fight. And as I said at the beginning, this game is a roguelike. You start your run through the halls, and every time you level up, you'll pick a trait that you can apply to either your character and upgrade their base stats, or traits that make the item abilities you have stronger. And trust me when I say this, when you first play this game, do not go for a balanced build. I tried that the first time thinking it was smart, but if you do, you'll end up dead. Over. And over. Again. Instead, go for a crit damage build as early as possible. If you see that 5% crit chance or that 20% crit damage, go for it no matter what. If you see that 10% damage trait, go for it. But if you don't get any damage traits in the very early game, then I'd go for either long fingers, movement, or attack speed. And I say the long fingers trait because you level up faster and will help you with those enemy trains and trying to get those level gems and any food that comes out of the broken barrels to help heal you. Then once you're about mid to late game with maxed out or near maxed out damage trait builds, then to go for a mix of both in traits of your abilities and defense traits. Also, block strength over base defense. For me to explain this well, I'm going to have to borrow a reference from Risk of Rain 2. Risk of Rain 2 has an item called Teddy Bear, and what Teddy Bear does is that it has a small chance to completely prevent you from taking damage, and each time you stack it, that chance increases. While block strength does something similar. Instead of having a chance to negate any damage, certain damage integers have a chance of being blocked. If you stack it a lot, smaller damage numbers have a 100% chance of being blocked, meanwhile higher damage numbers have maybe a 20 or 50% chance of being blocked, depending how much you've stacked. Now I don't know if it works like this, but if my theory is correct, you could theoretically make yourself borderline invincible if you stack block strength and base defense. Because what base defense does is it reduces your damage intake by a certain percentage, depending how much you've stacked. But that's what makes this game so fun to play. Because while yes, crit damage build is meta, but still messing around with different builds and different abilities, deciding on whether you want to be a glass cannon and just go all in on damage, or choosing to go for a more defensive sustainability build is always so fun and rewarding to do. But just one more thing to reinforce the fact that crit damage is meta though. Watch this. Oh, you don't think this is fun? I call this peak performance. Remember, knowledge is knowing crit damage builds are OP, but wisdom is using crit damage builds because they are OP. But what's cool is that this game has progression outside the main loop. Now if you've already played a roguelike, you already know how progression works in these types of games. But for those of you who haven't played one, the most basic type of progression systems they will have is that when you complete challenges or do something in the game, it will typically unlock some new perk or item for you to collect on your next run. Well, this game of course does that, and how you can check on your progression is at the quest shrine. Depending on what quest you do, each one will unlock either a new trait, a unique trait for a certain character, or unlock a new ability and unlock new traits for those as well. But the game offers two other forms of permanent progression for you as well. You have the Shrine of Blessing and the Well Trader, where you can retrieve one piece of gear after each run. And maybe it's because I'm fucking dumb, but for the longest time I could not figure out if the Shrine of Blessing permanently upgraded my character's base stats or upgraded the stats of traits on your runs. I don't remember when I figured this out, but I felt like a moron whenever I did. But I highly recommend you upgrade the Shrine of Blessing as much as possible. And also, don't be like me and get lazy in getting better gear. Invest in your gear as early as possible. Just obviously make sure you use gear appropriate to whatever build you're using. Whenever the game starts, you start with one character, the Swordsman, and upon completing certain quests, you will continue to unlock new characters. And by the end of it, you'll unlock all 7 characters, and these 7 characters you get to play, as introduced, the Swordsman, the Archer, Warlock, Exterminator, Sorceress, Shield Maiden, and Cleric. None of these characters really feel worse or better than one another, and each character is slightly different in how they play. The Swordsman is a close quarters, hard-hitting character if you go for a crit damage build with him, and the Archer is more of a ranged type of style. Try and make him do as much damage as possible and shoot as quick as you can to keep those enemies at bay. And I could go on about the other characters and how each one feels fun and somewhat unique to play, but I think that's just unnecessary bits that I don't really need to put in this video, and I don't want to spoil much in case you end up playing this game. Although I will say, before I started writing this video, I completely slept on the Archer and the Warlock. I just never put in the time to try them and just dismissed them almost from the start. And I highly recommend you don't do this as well. I finally gave them a try, and holy shit, my expectations were blown. This is sort of how I would list the best characters in my opinion. And yes, I know I said that none of the characters really feel better than one another, because at the end of the day, it does depend on what build you do for your character. But these characters, in my opinion, are really fucking good. The Swordsman, the Archer, Exterminator, and the Warlock. And I'll show you why. This game has a lot of replay value, which is kind of crazy because even though this game has only 3 maps, it's technically in early access. And if you watch my previous videos, you know that generally when a game says early access, it's usually a red flag that actually means this game is underdeveloped and lacks the most basic forms of content and are buggier than an infested anthill. But normally I'd let indie games somewhat get a pass at being in early access because they usually suffer from budget and team size constraints, so they usually can't make something at the scale they want right away, so they have to build up to get to that point. And sometimes I do think that happens though because developers are way too ambitious for what they can actually manage and just ends up not working. But thankfully this game doesn't do that. Now we don't know how many people are actually working on this game, considering the game isn't early access but still has a substantial amount of content that's worth the price of the game. I would guess this game is being made by either 3 people or less. And don't let that make you think I'm trying to disparage the game. Whether it's 1 person or 3, the game is very well made. The graphic style is very good in trying to give you that old school feel. In fact, I actually found out about this game through watching Lyric play it. And my first impression was that this was an old school game that he was playing from his childhood. And in terms of bugs, the game is very little from the amount of time I've played. The only bugs I've encountered so far are 3. One bug is where for some reason, my game will randomly go from high FPS down to 23 FPS specifically. Now there is a fix to this. All you have to do is Alt-Tab and click back in and it's fixed. Second bug I've encountered is that the pathing for the enemies is very simplistic to say the least. Don't get me wrong, that's not a problem, but with the very simplistic pathing, enemies get stuck behind boxes and barrels quite a bit. I think the most simple fix for this would be to make the enemies destroy these objects when they move through them. And the last bug I've seen is on the 3rd level, and that boss that shoots that crossbow will eventually get stuck and not move or shoot at you. They just get stuck there and can't really do anything. And one other bug I just now remembered writing this is one on the first boss where in the second phase, after so long of fighting him, he'll just eventually quit sending attacks at you, and none of the other bosses do this, just him specifically. And don't get me wrong, these bugs here I've listed aren't game breaking and ruin any aspect of fun or quality for this game. It's just those little blemishes you notice after a while of playing so much. If there's one thing that I would want to at least have in this game right now, if I had one wish, is to allow me to play this game with my friend. And look, I know I'm being the, I want co-op in my game type of person. And with my very minimal knowledge of game development, I'm sure that adding the co-op function itself wouldn't be very hard. I don't know what game engine this game is using, but in my small time using Unity, I know that Unity has tools that allow you to implement peer-to-peer hosting to your game without being super complicated. So as I said, the co-op function itself probably wouldn't be very difficult, but I think the difficult part would be balancing the game around co-op. And I obviously don't have the answers for you how you would, but that would be something that I'm sure the game developer would be smart enough to figure out. And I'm also aware too that this game was more than likely built around being single player, and that's totally fine. Not every game needs to be online and have some type of multiplayer, but you know, it's just one of those things that if I could have one thing to add to this game, I think that would be it, besides obviously more content. And one last thing, I do wish that at the end of your run, any new piece of gear or potions you've gathered you could keep when you finish the level. And I know that the well is there to make you be very picky in what gear you want to bring back home, but I think that should be a guarantee to you getting that gear. And I'd be totally fine if you still had to pay for the gear in order to use it. I just kind of find it tedious that when I go through a run, I would have to play over and over again to try and get a new piece of gear, especially since gear you've already retrieved and bought still show up in the loot pool. Or perhaps if you don't want to let me take my loot in my bag home, you can make it to where any piece of gear I bought or retrieved does not show up in the loot pool. Because since we can make loadouts, it doesn't really make any sense as to why we would want to switch to other gear we already own that we aren't using in our current loadout. But you know, it's been a little while since I bought a game and just played it non-stop because it was so fun. The only games in recent memory that I can remember that give me the same joy that this game gives me is RimWorld, 40k Bolt Gun, BattleBit, and Fallout New Vegas. And for the small price of $5, this game delivers more content and fun than what most AAA games can even hope to deliver nowadays. If you've already seen my recent video, AAA games are failing us, and my other video where I talk about live service games and how most of them feel soulless, I think both this game and BattleBit are great examples in proving that you don't need to have a massive game that's super complicated and has all these features that makes games feel more like learning a science rather than being a simple fun game. If you've already seen those videos, then you already know how I feel about the AAA gaming landscape, and with this game and BattleBit propelling forward in the Steam charts, I really hope that this teaches these big game companies that, as the Actman said in his Diablo video, less is more, because that's exactly what these games are. They have less features and mechanics than what Battlefield and Diablo have, but yet BattleBit and Halls of Torment are more fun to play than both of those games. And BattleBit is blowing 2042 out of the water. I know that Halls of Torment isn't going to compete with Diablo, nor is it trying to compete with it, but just comparing the fun factor between these games have less, but yet it feels like they have more, if you know what I'm saying. They're more fun to play. They're less grindy, and unlike most modern games now, actually have full-on progression systems that you don't have to pay a dime for. And the examples of this game and BattleBit makes me reiterate what I said in my AAA games video when I said that game engines are getting better and indie developers are getting better tools to be able to make games like this that make me even more excited for games like this, and why I think all of you should be directing your attention to as well. Because it feels like indie developers are the only people that truly understand what gamers want. Games now always want to be bigger and have more story, along with adding more features that just oversaturate the game itself, or hell, even take away features and mechanics away to focus more on plot rather than gameplay, and go for a pay to progress rather than giving the player the satisfaction of progressing through their own way. It's not that I have a problem with some of these games being more narrative driven than gameplay driven, but if you compare newer narrative driven games compared to older ones, those games still felt fun to play. Halo, Gears of War, Borderlands 2. These games have amazing narratives, but yet are also fun to play. Now I know that BattleBit doesn't have a narrative and Halls of Torment doesn't really have a narrative to go off of, but my point is that newer games are sacrificing fun for narrative. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mind someone making their creative vision in a video game, but these things can't be forced. And it sure as hell feels like they're trying to make narrative heavy games and forgetting about the fun part of the game. If you're someone like me who's just burnt out on all that stuff and just wants to play a fun game, that's why I recommend you turn to indie games. And again, I cannot begin to tell you how fun this game is. I mean, hell, I nearly have this game 100%ed, and I plan to 100% this game. And mowing down hordes of enemies with an OP character as they do that spiral of death swarm towards you is quite literally the definition of monkey neuron activated. This meme is literally me every run. But anyway, I apologize for going on that schizo rant there. It's just kind of what I've been thinking when I was playing through this game. This game proves that you don't need a large team, a big budget, and a big idea to make a good, fun game. All you need is love and passion for whatever it is you wish to create. I highly recommend you check out this game. As I said, it's only $5, and even if you're still on the fence, you can download the demo for it if you want. But that's going to do it for this video. If you made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and set the bell button to all notifications. And make sure to like to help out with the algorithm. And make sure to comment any thoughts you may have down below as well. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, and I shall see you when the next video drops.